Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Let me begin with a small prayer. Sada Shiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Guru Ratmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyamatvapta Dehaya Shri Dakshina Murtaye Namaha. A very warm welcome to yet another session of Weekend with Wisdom. And today we have a special guest, Shri Gokulmuthu Narayanaswamy ji, who is joining us all the way from Bangalore. And he'll be speaking on a very interesting and unique topic, Vedanta in the light of evolutionary and neurobiology. So there are a lot of new developments in the field of biology, especially in neurobiology and evolutionary biology. So he will be shedding light on some of those developments and how they map into our Vedantic understanding of an individual and many such questions that arise out of it. So before he begins, let me just give a brief introduction to Gokulmuthu ji. Gokulmuthu ji is a devotee and volunteer of Sir Ramakrishna Math. He conducts classes on Bhagavad Gita, Swami Vivekananda, spiritual life, leadership development, etc. to professionals and students. He is the founder of Vivekananda Study Circle in IIT Madras. He is a mentor of Vivekananda Study Circle at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. And he is a regular contributor of articles and book reviews to Vedanta Kesari, a monthly magazine published by Ramakrishna Math in Chennai. He also runs a blog, practicalphilosophy.in, wherein he writes on these philosophical matters regularly. He is working as Director of Product Development at Itron India, Bangalore, and he holds a BTech in Electrical and Electronics Engineering from IIT Madras and MSc in Computer Science from IISc Bangalore, and also MA in Philosophy, Religion and Culture from Annamalai University. He is currently pursuing his PhD, and he has taken the Diksha from Swami Gahanananda ji of Ramakrishna Math, and he has also learned Vedanta from Swami Paramarthananda ji of Arsha Vidya Sampradaya, and he has learned yoga from Swami Swayambhodananda ji, who is a disciple of Swami Satyananda Saraswati of Bihar School Yoga. So we have a very wonderful person, very versatile person speaking on a very unique topic. A warm welcome to you, sir. Gokulmuthu ji, thank you for taking time, for easily agreeing to this session. Please go ahead and start your session.
Thank you. Namaste, Nitin ji. Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Veda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha. Hari Om. Welcome to all of you. So today we'll talk about Vedanta in the light of biology, particularly evolutionary biology, neuroscience, biopsychology, those related fields. And as Nitinji said, there is a lot of recent developments which have happened, which help us to understand Vedanta, yoga, and sadhana better. So that would be the objective. Let me share my screen. Okay, so are you able to see the screen? Is it okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So practicalphilosophy.in is my blog. You can find a lot of articles there. So many of these topics I have been discussing in them also. You can dive deep there, or you can contact me if you are interested more on these topics. Okay, so what would be the objectives of the talk? Like what do I expect to cover? So let me in the two talks today and tomorrow. So first is different people would have different amount of familiarity with Vedanta. So I'll cover some basics of Vedanta, and of course, even people who are already familiar, this would be a good refresher, and also looking at Vedanta from the point of view in which we are going to see in this talk. And then we will go to some overlapping concepts in biology, and then I'll give you some insights into the recent developments which are happening in the biology of happiness, some experiments which have been conducted, some interesting reports, those kind of things, and some insights into the biology of stress, yogic interventions, and what is happening in those areas, and some nice insights. And then we will discuss a wide range of topics on the position of biology on, like hallucinations, consciousness, identity, free will, concept of an universal being, supernatural powers, and I think mantras, visualizations, various kinds of meditations. So those kind of topics we will touch upon, and then we'll see how we can use all this knowledge in our spiritual path. So this would be roughly the sequence and also the topics which we will cover today and tomorrow. And we'll stop each day about 15 minutes before, so that if you have any questions, we can discuss. Okay, fine. So going ahead, so basic question: what is Vedanta? Right, many of you might be familiar, and still, just to set the context, let me introduce you. So Vedanta is Veda Anta. So Veda Anta means either there are two meanings. One is the end portion of the Vedas. So as you all know, every Veda has got 4 parts. They are called the Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and the Upanishads. And the Upanishads are the last portions of every Veda, and they mostly talk about philosophical topics, and that is mostly what is covered in the Vedas. And when we say Vedanta, one of the meanings is the Upanishads is the meaning. And also it can be Vedanta can also be referred to as the essence of the Vedas. So which means what is the purport, what is the ultimate message of the Vedas, right? Including all the sections of the Vedas, which is also indicated by the word Vedanta. And Vedanta includes Gita and other books also. Now, what are the tenets of Vedanta? Right? What is Vedanta in a gist? Right? So the first concept in Vedanta we can understand is the Jiva Tattva. Jiva Tattva is the individual sentient being, and what we say in Vedanta is all living beings are essentially a conscious core covered by 3 bodies, which are called as gross body, subtle body, and causal body. Gross body is called Sthula Sharira, subtle body is called Sukshma Sharira, and causal body is called Karana Sharira. We'll go into more details. And in fact, if you say as an individual Jiva, usually the causal body is the one which is the cause for the individuality. So when we say Jiva Tattva, what you should understand is essentially it is the conscious core, and it is covered by the 3 bodies, right? Like there are various, so all these things I'm explaining to you in a more lucid way, and all of them have got corresponding shlokas in the Gita and other Prakarana Granthas. For example, Gita says, Mamaivamsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatanaha. Right? So that shloka from the Gita describes what is this, how it happens, so all these concepts are can be, you can trace it back to Gita and Upanishads. And the second concept in Vedanta is the Jagat Tattva, which is the insentient world, the material world. And of course, in Vedanta, we consider the mind also as a material world. So, and the body of all the living beings is also insentient material only. It's matter only. It's only the essence which is conscious. And of course, other than this mind and the body, like the external world is also insentient. So all those things constitute the material world in this world, right? And then the third concept is the Ishvara Tattva, where Ishvara is the supreme universal conscious being, right? So Vedanta is one of the like in Indian philosophy have got several darshanas, several frameworks, and Vedanta is a framework where we accept the existence of an universal consciousness, the universal conscious being, and he is called Ishvara. And the universal conscious being and everything that exists is the Lord only, is the Ishvara only. So it is by his will, though we use the word his, it is, it's more of a principle than of any personality. So it is by the will of Ishvara that all the laws of the universe are there, both physical laws, biological laws, moral laws, like all the laws of the universe are manifestations of the Ishvara. And all the matter and minds in the universe are all belong to Ishvara only, are all manifestations of Ishvara only. And all the living beings are also manifestations of Ishvara. So what you need to understand is there is nothing else other than Ishvara in this whole universe, right? So the entire what we saw as Jagat, Jiva Tattva and Jagat Tattva, they are all subsumed under Ishvara Tattva, and Ishvara is much more than all of these put together, right? So one of the suktas say like it's only just 1/4 of the Ishvara which actually has manifested as this entire universe and all its living beings. And 1/4 is of course is a symbolic. It basically says it's just a small part. So Ishvara is that universal conscious being, right, to whom this entire universe is the body, all the minds of all the living beings put together is the mind, and all the life of this universe is the life, and everything in this universe happens by the will of Ishvara. So this is the Ishvara Tattva. And we have the Nirguna Tattva, where we say all the three, Jiva, Jagat, and Ishvara, which are manifestations in the relative realm, and they are manifestations of a higher, unmanifest, supreme, pure consciousness in the absolute realm. So this is the Nirguna Tattva. And of course, depending on the different schools of Vedanta, some schools of Vedanta don't accept this Nirguna Tattva, and the Advaita school is one which accepts Nirguna Tattva. But other three, Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara, are accepted by all the schools of Vedanta. Just that the relationship might slightly vary. But these four tattvas are the core of Vedanta. So whenever you say, okay, what is the tenets of Vedanta? Like you need to talk about Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara, and Nirguna. Right? So this having said, now further, what do we do with that? Right? Now this is what we saw is the concept. And what is the goal of life? So the goal of life, according to Vedanta, is to realize the unreality of limited individuality of the Jiva. Right? So as you saw, the Jiva is a small part of this entire cosmos, small part of the Ishvara. And the Jiva doesn't exist independent of the rest of the universe at every level. Right? And the goal of life is to realize that in reality, the Jiva is not limited. There is this limited individuality is a fiction. Like we can understand it very easily. Like say, for example, you have this body, and like this body is an integral part of the physical universe, right? Every atom of this body is a part of the physical universe. and at every moment there is a flow of atoms and molecules which are from the rest of the universe become a part of this body, and from this body also, like, they keep and go and join rest of the universe. Whenever I inhale, like, a lot of atoms from rest of the universe come and they become a part of this body, and whenever I exhale, a lot of atoms and molecules which are currently as a part of this body go and they become rest of the universe. So there is always this constant flow, inflow and outflow, and this body cannot exist without rest of the universe, right? Similarly, even if you look at life, right, a living being cannot exist without other living beings. No living being in this universe can exist independently, right? All my food comes from other living beings, and this life itself becomes a support for so many other living beings in the body itself and also at the end of the body. So that way, like, the no life in this universe is independent of other life forms in this universe. Similarly, thoughts, right? Everything that I know has been gathered and known from other people, and all the ideas I have, there is nothing called an original thought. It's only a new combination of existing thoughts. So this way, if you look at it, the entire at every level, the jiva is not an individual. The concept of individuality of a jiva, of a person, is just a fiction. It is only in the mind, right? Like, that is one of this is and knowing this and realizing it is the goal of life, right? Realizing the unreality of limited individuality of the jiva is the goal of life. Now, to achieve this, life gives experiences like pleasure, pain, success, failure, gain, loss, right? In the words of Gita, like, Sitoshna Sukha Dukkeshu Labha Labhav Jaya Jayav, right? So all those things come so that we wake up to this reality of these dualities, we think about it and realize the truth. So the goal of all life experiences is for us to realize the truth. And all sorrow in life is because we don't understand what is the goal of life. Like, we often have a misunderstanding that goal of life is pleasure, or goal of life is to possess, goal of life is to survive. There are so many misunderstandings of what is the goal of life. So when we as an individual have something as the goal of life, and the rest of the universe has something else as the goal of our own life, then there is mismatch is there. Obviously there will be sorrow, right? When rest of the universe has decided something as the goal for our life, and the entire universe is designed and tailor made, every experience in life is tailor made towards that goal of this universe. If we have a different goal, and if we try to proceed towards something else, obviously we will land up in sorrow. So one of the main causes of sorrow in life is because our goal of life is not aligned with the goal of life decided for us, or the purpose of life which is as per the universe. And the second one is wrong identification with the body and mind. So not only we have not even understood the goal, and even the present moment, we have a wrong, we think we are this body and mind, and we attach ourselves too much to this body and mind and everything that comes with this body and mind, like relatives and possessions and degrees and achievements. Everything is ultimately tied to this body and mind, and when we wrongly identify with this body and mind, and we give too much of importance to whatever which surrounds us related to this body and mind, then obviously it will result in sorrow, because it starts from a wrong concept. So this is the cause of sorrow. And to become free, Vedanta uses a combined process, so of leading a virtuous life, contributing to the world, practicing meditation, studying Vedantic texts from a teacher. So this will create the right understanding. So right understanding of two things: right understanding of what is the goal of life, and right understanding of who am I, apart from, different from this body and mind. This right understanding will result in freedom from all sorrow. Right? So this is the way. And the main source books for Vedanta are the Vedas and Upanishads, as I told you, is a part of the Vedas. The fourth part of every Veda is Upanishads. So the Vedas, Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Sutra, so these three are called Prasthanatraya. And then there are Bhashyas, commentaries of them, and then sub-commentaries, like Bhashyas, Vartikas, Tikas. There are so many shades of commentaries and sub-commentaries which great people have written on these books. And there are Prakarana Granthas, which are primer texts written over a long period of time, right from the earliest of times to Shankara, to disciples of Shankara and various other acharyas, and even like we can even consider all the books by later saints also, or like Prakarana Granthas, and even the literature, bhakti literature, the songs and the poetry, they're all come under Prakarana Granthas, which help us to prepare, which mentally and emotionally prepare us to understand the core message of Vedanta, which we have discussed so far. Now, this, in summary, is Vedanta. So, what is Vedanta? So, we said first is Jiva Tattva, second is Jagat Tattva. Jiva Tattva is who is this individual sentient being, right? And Jagat Tattva is what is this insentient world outside. And then Ishvara Tattva, which is the universal conscious being. And then Nirguna Tattva, which is the pure consciousness beyond Jiva, Jagat and Ishvara, and which also underlies the Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara, which is pure, which is the Nirguna Tattva. And what is the goal of life? Understanding the unreality of limited individuality is the goal of life. And attaining this goal of life will free us from all sorrow. Okay? So this is the gist of Vedanta. And now, as I told you, the Nirguna Ishvara or Nirguna Brahman concept is at the Paramarthika level, which is at the absolute level, whereas the Saguna Ishvara and Jiva and Jagat, these are at the Vyavaharika level or the relative empirical level. And because we are going to spend the rest of the analysis more at the relative level, just be sure that you don't confuse it with the Paramarthika level. Okay, so when we say Vedanta here, we are not talking about, in the rest of the talk, we are not going to talk about Advaita Vedanta. We are going to talk about Vedanta at the Vyavaharika level. So when we say Ishvara, we mean Saguna Ishvara. Okay, fine. So with this background, we can proceed further. But before that, maybe we can pause. If there are any questions from anyone, I can answer.
Gokulmuthu, we'll take questions towards the end.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. We'll continue that. Okay, fine. So now let us go to the first concept I want to introduce you to is the four Purusharthas, and how the four Purusharthas actually form a logical framework in the evolution. Okay, so let us first understand the evolution as per biology. Right now, evolution is so Purushartha is about happiness. Every living being wants to be happy, right? So that is the concept of Purushartha, and how different beings pursue happiness. That is the concept of Purushartha, which we will also discuss. Now, when we come to biology, So we have the lowest organisms, right? Like all your bacteria and plants and those kind of things, and they have only things like hunger, thirst, lust, pleasure, pain, fear, sleep. This is where their happiness lies in, right? So there's a beautiful Sanskrit shloka which says ahara nidra bhayam maitunam cha samanyam etat pashubir naranam, right? Ahara, that is hunger and food. Ahara, nidra, sleep. Bhayam, right? Protection of the self protection, right? Like bhayam. And uh, maitunam, right? Reproduction. So these are common for all living beings, including human beings. So that is so that is the idea. So the lowest, uh, so the lowest form of pursuit of happiness is this hunger, thirst, and lust, pleasure, pain. These things which are there even for single cellular, unicellular organisms, right? They just have to. They want to just survive and multiply. Khao piyo maja karo. That's all, right? Now, when the when we go to the next level, higher animals which live in herds, right? Like your lions and tigers and elephants, they live in herds, and because they have herd mentality, like so they have their own herd and other herds, and so within the herd, within their own group, they have love. They protect them, and they show courage. They show possession. And when it comes to the other competing herds or predators, like they show hatred, anger, like competition, those kind of things. So these are the next higher level of pursuits which we can see in the animal world, right? So where the happiness is in loving the young ones, happiness is in taking care of the members of your own herd, and happiness is in protecting your herd from external danger. Like so all these things drive the pursuits of these higher animals. And if you go still higher, then we come to the human level, where values play a lot of role here. Because we can think ahead. We have this what is called as mirror neurons, because of which we can simulate environments, we can simulate situations in the long term, and because of which we can come up with ideas of what is right and what is wrong, right? Like lower animals can see only the current situation, whereas we have the capability of having memory and recalling the memory and running mental simulations, and seeing what would be the projecting and predicting what would be the effect, and based on that we can decide between right and wrong, right? So rights and wrongs. And then like belief systems, right? Like where we don't want to work out in detail, but we just want to take something for granted. Like so there are a lot of not everything can be worked out logically. So we have belief systems, ideologies, like different religions or political ideologies or economic ideologies, all kinds of things, right? Communism, capitalism, Marxism, or religions, right? Different religions. So they're all and even like belief in ancestors or belief in law of karma, right? Belief in heaven, belief in hell, all these things are all beliefs and ideologies. So all these things are unique to human beings. And from all these right and wrong come our sense of duties, rights, justice, and sacrifice, truth, discipline, and compassion, right? Satya, ahimsa, brahmacharya. Like all these value systems, they all come from this concept of uh, right and wrong, which we are because of our higher capabilities of the brain, right? And so so when it goes to this level of evolution, we come to the human level. And going ahead, if you go still further, that is where we come to the spiritual level, where we are not looking for conditional happiness or things which keep changing, because all these things like right and wrong and belief and disbelief, the desire and hatred, right, hopes and you have disappointments, success, failure, they're all dualities which will keep on changing. But what we ultimately want is unconditional and permanent happiness, right? So the pursuit of unconditional permanent happiness is the spiritual level, right? We don't want happiness because something goes right, or because we achieve something, or because like there is a sensual experience. These are all temporary and conditional sources of happiness. We seek something which is unconditional and which is permanent happiness. Now, the question is it possible? Yes, it is possible, because that is where we have examples of people who have attained this, right? The great acharyas, the great saints, avatars, they all have demonstrated that this unconditional permanent happiness is possible. And now going towards that, right, is the spiritual goal. And if it is unconditional and permanent, then it should be here and now, right? An unconditional permanent happiness is beyond space and time and causation. So which means here and now, I should be able to experience this unconditional permanent happiness, right? There's nothing which can stop me. And the only thing which can happen is ignorance. It may be there in front of me, but I don't know, I cannot recognize it, and so I think I don't have it. So that is exactly what Vedanta says. It says the unconditional permanent happiness is always there in your access, and all that you need to know is what is the true knowledge of yourself. Who am I? If I know the answer to the question who am I correctly, then I will be able to tap this unconditional permanent happiness from within, because it is always there by nature, because it is unconditional and permanent. And this is the spiritual goal. Okay. And this is what the scriptures, the Vedanta, calls it as the four pursuits. The pursuit of happiness in the lower things, survival and survive and multiply, that is called artha. And the pursuit of happiness in the luxuries and emotions, at that level, it is called kama. And the pursuit of happiness through values is called dharma. And pursuit of happiness at the unconditional and permanent happiness, pursuit of that happiness which comes through knowledge, that is called moksha. So this artha, kama, dharma and moksha are very well fall into the structure of evolution, as biology has proved time and again. And it is there's no doubt about it. We don't need to question evolution, because it has been proved. And it is only because evolution is true that medicines which work for a human being also works for other animals. Like if you want to test a particular medicine for human disease, you can test it on an animal, because the animal has the same body constitution as a human being. To understand how the biology of a human being works, it is very easy to understand more simpler animals, right? Like even lobsters, for example, right, who have got a very simple nervous system. And understanding that nervous system gives a lot of understanding into the human nervous system. That is because the whole thing is one evolutionary tree, and what works for one animal will work for another animal. So you never need to question evolution, because that is something which has been, like it is there. Like, and even our farmers and everyone have been breeding, animals, farm animals, breeding like rice and other crops, and genetics and all those things have been in the experience of everyone for centuries, right? So So this is not something which you need to question, and like some even it is really sad that even in a country like America and other places, there are people who still question evolution, right? Anyway, so we can see very clearly that the gradation of Purusharthas fall very much into the way biology has discovered and formulated evolution. And of course, this Artha, Kama, Dharma, Moksha is what is there in our Indian flag also, right? Artha, Kama is prosperity, which is indicated by the green band at the bottom. Dharma is indicated by the yellow in the middle with the Dharma Chakra there. And the saffron at the top indicates Moksha. And the sequence says what is above the other, right? So the evolution is of the Purusharthas is depicted in the Indian flag itself. Fine. And so also another thing is manifesting our higher values and freeing ourselves from the lower traits itself is a contribution to nature, right? Like say, for example, like a person, as a person, like if let us say I have a problem that I'm short-tempered, and now being short-tempered and being subject to anger is a lower level of evolution, which comes at the herd survival level, the emotional level, right? It's not anger and jealousy, these are all not human characteristics, right? Anger, jealousy, right? Arrogance, desire, right? These are all not human characteristics. They are all animal characteristics, which unfortunately we are still having it because of the evolution, right? There are so many things in the body which we have inherited from our animal past, and there are also some of these mental and psychological traits which we have inherited from the animal past, and those are what is called as the Shatripus, right? The Kama, Krodha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, right? The 6 psychological defects which freeing from which we can attain moksha. Those 6 psychological defects: Kama, Krodha, right? Kama is desire, Krodha is anger, Lobha is greed, Moha is delusion, Mata is arrogance, and Matsarya is jealousy. These 6 are called Shatripu, 6 enemies or 6 psychological defects. These 6 defects belong to the lower animals, and unfortunately we have inherited them from the lower animals, and to be really human beings we have to get over them, right? So they are kind of just like we have vestigial organs in the body. These are vestigial psychological remnants which we have to overcome to become really human beings, and then going ahead we will be able to establish our spiritual nature, right? So now we being working on ourselves and getting ourselves overcome these psychological defects, that itself is our contribution to nature and to evolution, because that is the evolution which is happening in nature, and we need to contribute that. Whereas if we succumb to anger or greed or lust or jealousy, then we are actually falling back into the animal nature and doing disservice to the 13.8 billion years of evolution. So that is the way we look at it. Now, going ahead, we saw knowledge of ourselves, right? Now, Vedanta gives a very beautiful structure to who am I, and it gives it in 5 layers. Panchakosha, it is called. And this also is very scientific, and totally it is in line with modern biology, as we will see. Okay, so this 5 koshas is there in we can find it in many Upanishads, in the Gita, and lot of all the Prakarana Granthas. Everywhere you will, whenever we want to have a theory of an individual jiva, this 5 koshas is the theory. And of course, this 5 koshas is a slightly more elaborate form of the 3 shariras, right? Which I'll tell you the correlation also. And we all know the famous BMI chart, which Chinmayananji used to use, which is a simplified version of the Panchakosha. Now, the first kosha is the physical kosha, the Annamaya kosha, which is the physical body. Now, how do you know how can you discern what is the Annamaya kosha? So, suppose there is a dead body which is died just now, right? Now, what is common between the dead body now and when it was alive? That is the Annamaya kosha. And what is not common? That is the rest of it. Okay. So, if you look at the characteristics of the Annamaya kosha, so things like height, weight, place of birth, right, name of parents, complexion, color of eyes, color of hair. These are all characteristics of the Annamaya kosha, right? And this, these properties help us to identify what it is, right? Now, the next layer is the Pranamaya kosha, the physiological layer, right? So, the physiological layer you can see is what is common between a person in coma and a person who is normally living. So for a person in coma, like all the physiological activities are happening, right? Like all the blood is flowing, the heart is pumping, the lungs are breathing, the kidney is functioning, liver is functioning, everything is functioning. But just that the person, his sense organs are not functioning, right? So the Pranamaya kosha is basically the physiological sheath which constitutes all these digestive system, respiratory system, excretory system, circulatory system, all these things put together. So if you look at what is the characteristics, things like temperature, pulse rate, blood pressure, sugar level, allergies, illnesses, these all are part of the Pranamaya kosha. Now, beyond this is the Manomaya kosha, which is the emotional layer. So where, suppose let us say there is a person who is mad or even an animal. Now, what is common between an animal and a human being, right? So the physical body is there, the lungs are functioning, heart is functioning, and likes and dislikes are there. The animal also, like if there's a cow, for example, if you show a grass, it will come. If you show a stick, it will go away. So all those things are common, right? Now, so that is at the Manomaya kosha level, right? Either a mad person or even an animal. What is common between an animal and a living being or a human being is up to the Manomaya kosha level. So what happens here is, like the skills, the knowledge, like anger, jealousy, arrogance, desire, greed, fear, right? All these things, right? These all at the Manomaya kosha level. Like a person knows how to swim, how to walk, a person knows how to ride a cycle. He can do some things. He can, like has some secular knowledge, like some knowledge about some things. That also comes under the Manomaya kosha level. And also, likes and dislikes. So mainly likes and dislikes are the main part of the Manomaya kosha level, right? What kind of food a person likes, what places he likes to see, what kind of weather he likes, movies, books, hobbies. All these things are at the Manomaya kosha level, right? So now this is the emotional sheath. Okay. Now going beyond is the Vijnanamaya kosha or the intellectual sheath, which is the value level, right? So this is all the value system lies in this layer of the personality. So we have what is right, what is wrong, significance of honesty, kindness, and discipline, and patriotism, political affiliations, religious beliefs, right? Willpower. So all these things come under the Vijnanamaya kosha level. And then comes the Anandamaya kosha or the blissful sheath, it is called, which is the subconscious tendencies, and so their luck, karma phala, right? And the situations that you have faced in life, opportunities that you have been blessed with, all these things come from the Anandamaya kosha level. So the Anandamaya kosha is a place where you are not aware of what is there, right? Things happen without your knowledge. Whereas the Manomaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha level, like you will be, it is in your conscious mind. So you are aware of what is there. Say, for example, if there is a value system which affects your decision making, if you are aware of it, that is at the intellectual level. but if you are not aware of it, that would be at the Anandamaya Kosha level. So this is how the 5 koshas are depicted in the Vedantic tradition. And you can see that, if earlier we saw the lower level animals and we saw the evolution, you can see the same kind of evolution here also, right? Like if you see like the lowest animals, they have the physical body, or you can say the physical body is there even for a non-living being, right? Like even a stone has got a weight and a height, right? So this is for even the Annamaya Kosha, right? This level is even for a non-living being. And then the most primitive beings, they also have the physiological level. When you go to the higher animals, then they have this also. And then when you come to human beings, then you have this also. Of course, this is a one which is common to all living beings. So this one is a special layer, but you can see that this layer, you can see the same progression that we saw in the previous slide. We can see here also. We can correlate the different levels, right? And the real person, I, is pure consciousness beyond these 5 layers. So when we say, who am I? So we start from what we can see, and what we can perceive and conceive and imagine. So we identify these 5 koshas, and then we can say that I am the person who is beyond these 5 layers, because these are all only layers. These are only coverings, right? And I am beyond all these. That which is, like beyond these 5 layers is what is the Atman, right? Panchakosha Vilakshana. So that is what the scriptures say. And so now another view I'll want to give of the Panchakosha, right? And we saw this Panchakosha, Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha. So now another detail which you can see, I told you about the 3 shariras. Okay. So the Annamaya Kosha is called the gross body, right? Stula Sharira, we call it. And the 3, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, those 3 are called the subtle body. And the last one is Anandamaya Kosha, is called the causal body. Okay. So gross body is what everyone can see. Subtle body is one only the person who knows is aware of. And Anandamaya Kosha, the subconscious layer, is something even the person also is not aware of. So that is another way of looking at the 3 bodies. Right? Gross body, you also know, others also know. Subtle body, you know, but others don't know. Whereas the causal body, you also don't know, others also don't know. So that is the way it is divided. And another thing which you can see is that the Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha are actually, they map to 3 regions in the brain, which is very well known in the neuroscience, right? Like, so if you look at it, like there is this reptilian brain, like the reptilian brain is, the medulla oblongata, which is here. So this part, right? So, and also the cerebellum, right? This part is the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain is responsible for all the involuntary actions and all the instinctual actions, right? Reflex actions, all those things come from the reptilian brain, of course, extends as the spinal cord also. Now, this is if you look at the function of the Pranamaya Kosha, that also is the same as the function of the reptilian brain. And also we can see that this is the earliest part of the brain, right? That's why it is called reptilian brain. And it is there well developed even in the lowest animals. Okay. And then when you go to the next level, this is called the limbic system. So where you have the hypothalamus, thalamus, hypothalamus, this is the amygdala, so now these hippocampus, right? So now these together, it is called the limbic brain, which is called the emotional brain. This is the seat of emotions, and that is what is called Manomaya Kosha in the Panchakosha theory. The functions, whatever the scriptures describe as the Manomaya Kosha, perfectly and completely coincide with what we know as the functions of the limbic brain. And of course, and the limbic brain is well developed even in the animals also. So that way, like, the evolution also comes at the till the animal level. And the neocortex, which is this part, right, and which is mainly this major part of the cerebrum, right, is the neocortex, and that is what is called as a rational or thinking brain. It is well known in the neuroscience that different portions of the neocortex, they correspond to different functions of the brain. For like you have the Broca area, like, which is for language, and you have perception areas, you have motor areas, you have thinking areas. All these areas are there in the neocortex, and that functionality is very much coincides with the Vijnanamaya Kosha, where we talk about value systems, right? And so that way, and the neocortex is something which is much more developed in human beings than other animals. And even according to Vedanta, right, we saw the Sanskrit shloka, right, like ahara nidra bhayam maitunam cha samanyam yetat pashubir naranam buddhir hitesham adiko visheshaha buddhir vihina pashubir naranam. So the Buddhimaya Kosha is same as Vijnanamaya Kosha. Vijnanamaya Kosha has got another name called Buddhimaya Kosha. So if you look at the shloka, ahara nidra comes from the reptilian brain. Okay, ahara nidra, and even to an extent bhayam also, but bhayam and maitunam mainly come from the limbic system. So ahara nidra from the reptilian brain, bhayam maitunam comes from the limbic system. These are all samanyam yetat pashubir naranam, right? For both for animals and human beings, they are all common. Buddhirhi tesham adiko vishesha. For the human being, this buddhi is the one which is this part, right? So the buddhirhi tesham adiko vishesha and buddhir vihina pashubir naranam. So without this buddhi, right, which is the neocortex, and a human being is as good as an animal. That exactly, aligns with the understanding of the brain by biology and neuroscience. And then we have the causal body, which is beyond this, which is the subconscious level, where we say karma and tendencies called samskara, and worldview, like, the subconscious worldview. All these things are seated in the Anandamaya Kosha level. So this is how, the Panchakosha, actually we can see that it, the way the functionality and all those things are described in Vedanta match very well with the neuroscience also. Now, so far what I showed you was more of a structural view. Now let us go through a transactional view, okay, of the same Panchakosha, which will give us still better understanding of how it works, how the Panchakosha works. Okay, so here I have put the same thing in a different format. Okay, so the Annamaya Kosha, so you have is the physical body, right, and the Pranamaya Kosha is the physiological processes, and Manomaya Kosha is the sense faculties, action faculties, likes and dislikes, these, and Anandamaya Kosha is the subconscious level, right? And so first I have skipped the Buddhimaya Kosha or Vijnanamaya Kosha. So let us see first what happens for an animal. Okay, so let us say, for example, this is a dog, and the dog sees some food. Okay, now what happens? So that is a life situation. The dog is hungry. A hungry dog sees a food. That's a life situation. Now, the physical eyes see the food. The physical nose smells the food, right? So that is at the physical body level, right? And this totally happens at the unconscious level, right? Even the dog doesn't know that these things are happening. And the sense organs, chemical reactions happen in the nose, in the nose buds, and in the smell receptors, and even all those things, the physiological processes also, they all happen at the unconscious level. And then comes the Manomaya Kosha level. At the Manomaya Kosha level, the dog is aware that there is a food which smells very tasty, right? So that is what the dog is able to see. Okay, so now then the Manomaya Kosha has got memory of past likes and dislikes, and it is also has an instinct. It is programmed that, okay, it is hungry, so it will go for the food, right? So now those likes and dislikes, now this is what the dog is aware of, and then the input goes to the subconscious level where the decision is made. Decisions are made at the subconscious level. So where it is called the samskara or the tendencies. So at that level, the decision is made, and let us say the dog, for example, wants to move towards the food. So it comes here and it goes and activates the motor areas of the brain, and the dog is also aware that okay, it wants to move towards the food, and the action faculties, and then it comes to the unconscious where the motor areas of the brain get activated and the muscles contract, and the dog moves towards the food. So this is how it happens, and this life situation happens, we say, because of the past karma. Okay, because every effect should have a cause. Now when it comes to a human being, then we have the buddhimaya kosha, which is extra. Okay, so what happens, let us say a human being sees food, a nice smelling food in a restaurant or somewhere, and the same thing happens. He sees the food, and then his eyes see it, his nose smells it, and then it comes here, likes and dislikes. They say yes, the food is good, and then the sense of values come into picture here. Now, is it clean? Is it good? Do I have money? Or is today Ekadasi, right? The food might be there, I might be hungry, but if today is Ekadasi, then I will not eat the food. So that sense of values come at the buddhimaya kosha level, right? No animal follows Ekadashi Upavasa or Shivaratri Jagran, or no animal follows living a lifelong celibacy like a monk. Animals and all don't follow that, right? They are all human value systems at the buddhimaya kosha level, right? And the person, we also have this, we do the self analysis, and this free will using is there at this level. And then again, all this input is fed into the subconscious level, and the decision is made at the subconscious level, and it comes down. And we have again here, there's a self discipline, there's a veto here, where we can, even if we want to do it, like we can decide not to do it, right? But then this is very weak. Even Bhagavad Gita says, like, nigraham kim karishyati, right? That's what Gita says. The downward path, the self-discipline is very difficult. So if at all we want to follow something good, we have to do self-analysis and build the right samskaras and the right worldview, so that the subconscious decisions are made in the right way. Because at the conscious level, we don't have too much of control. We have free will only to form the samskaras. We don't have much self-control at the time when actions actually happen. So that is exactly what Vedanta says, and it is fully in line with whatever biology also talks about. And then, like action faculties, we decide to go towards the food, and then the legs will move and hands will move and things will happen. And also because we have made, because of the free will, right? Because there is an entity, it's a free willing entity here, there will be a karma phala also. There will be a fruit of that action, which also will get accumulated. So at the subconscious level, there are three things which get affected. Like we have samskara, which is tendencies, jnana, which is the worldview, and karma phala, which is the result of the action, right? So these three are the ones which are at the Anandamaya Kosha level, which a person carries from life after life, right? So in fact, this is what is permanent, right? So if so which means like even whatever money you have earned in this life, you will leave back here in this world and go away. But if by your self-effort, if you have become a more honest person, or a more a charitable person, or a more compassionate person, a less angry person, so whatever characteristics, whatever good samskaras, good characters that you build, that will go in your samskara layer, and that you will carry even over to the next life, right? So that is what we understand from this Anandamaya Kosha level, where these are stored there. Okay. And so the Sthula Sarira, Shukshma Sharira, Karana Sharira, I told you, I told you already. Like, so the gross body is the Annamaya Kosha, and the Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body, is this three put together, and Karna Sharira is the Anandamaya Kosha, which is this. Right? So this is the transactional view. This is what happens. So this shows how the Panchakosha work when in real life situations, right? And this is one of the key concepts in Vedanta. It is there in multiple places, both in Upanishads, Gita, in Prakarana Granthas, everywhere they talk about it. And the whole system of how decisions are made, how the input comes, the entire psychology of how things work is very much in line with the modern discoveries of biology and neuroscience and biopsychology. Like they're all coinciding very much with what we understand in Vedanta. And of course, this part of it, biology is not in agreement with that. The Anandamaya Kosha level, this part is carried from life to life, because that concept is not there in biology, because biology is more current biology is made based more on a reductionist approach, right, where matter is considered as a primary entity, whereas here in Vedanta we consider consciousness as the primary entity, and rest comes from there. So in Vedanta, this Anandamaya Kosha, Karna Sharira, keeps going, is the actual real individual who keeps traveling from one body to another body, carrying this part. But then that is something which is not currently in agreement with biology. Biology says all these things come genetically right from birth, right? So that is the position of biology. Otherwise, rest of it, whatever is below here, all these things, whatever happens here, everything what Vedanta says, and of course Vedanta, when you say Vedanta, it's Vedanta and Yoga, right? So what Vedanta and Yoga talk about is fully in agreement with the biology and biopsychology. Okay. And so now I told you that the goal of life is to attain knowledge, and by that knowledge we will be able to get free from our limit identification with the limited individual. Now how does that happen, right? So as I told you, like there are two basic biological instincts, right? Or one basic biological instinct which also manifests as the other one, which is basically survival. The entire organism is designed for survival. That is the fundamental thing, and that is what Vedanta also accepts, that then that is what we call as avidya. Okay, and because we have to overcome that to establish ourselves as human beings and go beyond that to establish our spiritual nature. Now, with this, Vedanta gives a beautiful roadmap, right? So initially, we depend on the world for security, and we depend on the world for pleasure. So this is at the reptilian brain level, this is at the limbic level, right? So that's what we saw. We saw the reptilian brain and limbic system, right? So what they biologically, like the brain is hardwired to seek security in the world and to seek pleasure in the world, because actually pleasure also indirectly leads to security of the person and also of the species. So that is why so the security is mainly about the individual organism, and pleasure is something which nature has put in so that the species survives, right? So depending on the world for security and for pleasure is something which is hardwired as a part of the evolution as in the system. And to go ahead to evolve into a human being and to evolve further into a spiritual being, we need to break this. We need to break these two psychological conditioning, which is hardwired into the brain. How do we do that? That is where we have Karma Yoga. So Karma Yoga breaks the world dependence for security. So naturally, the brain is hardwired to say, okay, like you go and you do work and then you get the fruits and you survive, right? And in Karma Yoga, what do we do? We say, do the work, but don't have the results in mind. Do your duty, don't worry about the results, right? And results will come by law of karma. Results will come. So thus, depending on the order in nature, depending on the law of karma, you go ahead and you do your duty, but without any eye on the results. That is Karma Yoga. And that is a technique which will break this hardwiring which we have to depend on the world for security. Okay. And when we have that, then we will be able to achieve equanimity in all situations, right? So that is the Sarvatra Samabuddhi. So that is one of the first, this is one of the first sadhana which is needed to stop this depending on the world for security and having an equanimity in all situations, whether it is Sita, Shitoshna, Sukha Dukkeshu, Labha, Labha, Jaya, Jaya, right? Like whether it is heat or cold, right? Whether it is pleasure or pain, whether it is success or failure, whether it is gain or loss, you get this equanimity by doing Karma Yoga, and that will break the biological tendency of seeking security. And then you go to the next step, which is Dhyana Yoga, right? And Dhyana Yoga is designed to break this biological tendency where you seek pleasure in the world, right? So this is about the reptilian system. This is about the limbic system. So you get freed up from your reptilian brain, the conditioning of the reptilian brain and conditioning of the limbic brain by these two sadhanas, right? So Dhyana Yoga is designed to break dependence on this world for pleasure, right? So you close your eyes, you become introvert, and in the initial phases of Dhyana Yoga, you tap into the pleasure which you get within, right? So Gita says, what is that? Atindriyam, buddhigrahyam, atindriyam, right? So it says like you, dhyana will give you a pleasure, which is buddhigrahyam, atindriyam, which you can tangibly feel in the mind, but it is not originated from the senses, right? So you develop a meditation routine by which you become independent of the external world for your pleasure, right? So we will see in the further slides on how exactly happiness works based on biology and neuroscience, like how the dopamine and serotonin and how those things work. So basically here in Dhyana Yoga, in meditation, what you say is what nature has designed is, if you do this, I will give you some dopamine and you will feel happy. Okay. And what you say is, I don't need any external source for dopamine. I have a certain series of techniques. I close my eyes and I can create my own dopamine in my brain. I don't depend on the external world for my dose of dopamine. Now that comes in Dhyana Yoga. That is what is called Buddhigrahyam Atindriyam, right? So by that, we break this dependence on the limbic system. And when we get that, when we are able to establish that part, then we can control the mind and the senses, because the mind and the senses are running towards the sense objects because nature has hardwired it to seek that way, because nature is designed for survival, right? Kathopanishad says, no, Paranchikani Vritrinat Swayamvo Parang Pashyati na Antaratma, right? So Paranchikani, like the sense organs, are created by the Lord facing outward, right? Paranchikani Vritrinat Swayambho Tasmat Parang Pashyati na Antaratma. Because of that, they go and look outside. They don't look inside. Now, to break that, Dhyana Yoga is the discipline. That is a sadhana to be done. And once you are able to find that you don't need to depend on the sense objects for your pleasure, then automatically they drop off. And when you have attained these two, right? So where you don't depend on this world for security and you don't depend on the world for pleasure, then you reach a state what is called as yoga ruda. Right? So Gita 6th chapter gives the definition, right? Yadahi na indriyarteshu na karmashu anusajjate. Yadahi na indriyarteshu, right? So not the sense objects, na karmashu, right? Not the actions. So you don't depend on the indriyarthas, the objects for pleasure, na karmashu. You don't depend on karma for your security. So yadahi na indriyarteshu na karmashu anusajjate, then sarva sankalpa sannyasi, such a person will not have any worldly agenda. Sa yoga rudastha dochite. So that person is called a yoga ruda. And then Krishna Gita says, okay, then after that you go to the next step where you go, then your mind is ready for jnana yoga. And then by getting knowledge from a teacher in a systematic way, right? And here this shloka, etvaksharam anirdeshyam abhyaktam paryupasate sarvatra gamachintyam cha kutastam achalam dhruvam. So this gives the very beautiful description of the Nirguna Brahman, and that is a jnana yoga. So you pursue jnana yoga, which will establish your independence in this world, right? So this way, right, the whole sadhana is actually very beautifully, you can map it to how the biological systems are, right? So the biological inheritance, like the whole evolution has given us this body and mind for survival, right? So we will see there is a person, Donald Hoffman, who has done a lot of research and simulation studies on how this entire system is designed for survival and not for knowledge, right, of the reality. So he has done a lot of experiments and proved that, and we will discuss about those things tomorrow. So so basically, like, you have this two halves, right, two dependences, right, which come directly from the reptilian brain and from the limbic system, right, and which is what is called as maya, which is what is called as the bondage, right? What we call as maya and what we call as bondage, avidya, it is basically dependence on the world for security and pleasure, right? Dependence on the world for security and pleasure is called samsara, and that exactly comes from the way the brain is designed, the way it has evolved to the extent. Now, up to becoming a human being, it has served its purpose. That is why we are here. But then to go ahead into the spiritual attainments, we have to break this dependence. We have to break this part, and we have specific sadhanas, karma yoga and dhyana yoga, to break these specific bondages which are there as a part of the biological system in the brain. And when we do that, then we are independent, and now we are able to reach to a state which Gita calls as yoga ruda state, where we can go ahead, right? So, so Gita says, Arurukshor muner yogam karma karana muchyate. So initially you have to do this, which is, and then yoga ruda taseva shamah karana muchyate. So after this yoga ruda state, you go for jnana yoga. So Gita is this basically the roadmap is given in the 6th chapter also, and in other places also, right? Like 5th chapter, and there are a lot of places where this roadmap is very clearly given, right? And this also, this roadmap which Gita gives and which also the Upanishads give, also very well correlates with the discoveries in biology and what both in terms of the neuroscience and evolution, whatever we learn from biology on why this human being behaves like this, why this human mind behaves like this, and what are the drivers, and how to make a person really independent, right? To make a person really independent of these bondages, right? This conditioned thinking, right? Like this basically like creates a lot of conditioned thinking which result in wrong decisions and which result in sorrow and other things. Now, to break these conditions, like how to proceed further, like so biology gives the theory, but then the objective, of course, biology being a science, and It is not a normative science, so it doesn't have an objective of what is the purpose of life and those kind of things that come as under philosophy. So whereas Vedanta is both a science and a philosophy, right? It is both, right? Brahma Vidya, and also it's a Yoga Shastra. So Brahma Vidya is the theory part, and Yoga Shastra is the practical part, how to use this theory to proceed further. So we can take from both, and we are able to integrate, and we are able to understand. We can using Vedanta we can understand biology better, and using biology we can understand Vedanta better. That is what I see so far, right? So I think we'll stop here, and we will continue tomorrow, where we will go into still more deeper aspects, where as I told you, like, what is the theory of the biology of happiness, biology of stress, how yoga addresses them, and how the theory of what discoveries about happiness in biology, how they are all in line with Vedanta and yoga. And then, like, there are a lot of interesting topics, right? Like about free will, about God, about, like individuality, identity, like consciousness. So we'll pick up more all those topics we will discuss, and I will also give you a lot of pointers to some publications in various fields of biology and biopsychology. I think if you're interested in that also, you can go. Tomorrow I'll give you, and also tomorrow I'll give you a list of reading books for reading, like about 10-15 books I can, which I have read, and also like to different extents to get all this knowledge. I'll give you the references also tomorrow. Okay. So I'll stop here for today. Any questions we can take?
Yeah. Thank you, Gokulmuthu. Can you stop your presentation?
Yes.
Thank you, Gokulmuthu, for a wonderful, very interesting presentation. And yes, now is the time. If you have any questions, please put it in Q&A box, and I'll take it up. So as we wait for any questions, if there are, so I'll ask. I have one or two questions, Gokulmuthu. These are generic questions, I would say, pertaining to the larger topic. One of the things we see is often that we try to map Indian concepts into Western framework, scientific framework. I believe that it is high time that the reverse should happen. Because for example, in biology and Vedanta itself, if you see uh, the, the koshas, the Panchakoshas, and all that we discussed, they are not. There is no direct correlation between the biological categories and them. So, how do you see it? Do you think? Do you also think that it is more fruitful to map the modern scientific categories to Indian categories rather than vice versa? That is, to subsume the modern categories into Indian categories and place them at their rightful position from an Indian perspective. What is your thinking?
So multiple things here. One is, to an extent, we do that by using non-translatables. Like, for example, Atman cannot be translated. Right? There is no equivalent word in English or any non-Indian language for Atman. The best translation for Atman is I. Right? Now, we cannot use the word I as a replacement for Atman, because it will create a lot of confusion. So, but the meaning of the word Atman is I, right? The real I. So that way, like, whether it is Atman or Dharma, and even the Purusharthas, right? Artha, Kama, Moksha, Dharma, right? And even the Panchakoshas, like Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha. Now, these are all things where these are all original Indian concepts, and we should not translate them. We may use a translation to explain, saying, okay, this is what it means. But then whenever we talk about these concepts, we should always carry the Sanskrit word along with that, right? And it is not something which is very different. Like I remember, like Rajaji Rajagopalachari. He, when he was the governor of the Madras state, this was during the British rule. Okay, he went to the Directorate of Education, the British government, and then told him that we want to have science education in Tamil Nadu in Tamil. Okay. And then the collector said, like, how will you teach science in Tamil? Like, where are the words? Then he said, just see the audacity. He said, well, English also doesn't have technical words, but you are able to teach it in English. Why can't we teach in Tamil? Then the collector, he was set back. He said, like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean by we don't have technical words in English? Then Rajaji asked him, okay, tell me what is the meaning of biology? And the collector said, well, bio means life, logi means study. Then Rajaji asked him, in which language? He said, bio means life in Greek and Latin. Logos means like study. So then Rajaji asked him, so how is biology an English word? It is all Greek and Latin only. So he said, like, you use Greek and Latin in all your science and this thing while teaching science, and you don't have any original words in English for all these things, but then you're able to teach it in English. And he said, we don't have that problem. Our Sanskrit and Tamil are rich enough to have technical words in science in our own language. We don't need to borrow from Greek and Latin. So that way we can teach science and maths much more effectively in Indian languages than in English. And he got he convinced the director of education, and then they started translating the books and creating the technical words in Sanskrit and Tamil, and then the whole entire teaching started.
Oh, okay. So wonderful.
So basically, the main thing is, the Western science has retained the Greek and Latin words for all the concepts, even though they teach in English. And similarly, we should push so that the Sanskrit words and the Tamil words, because like our yoga and Vedanta are full of roots in Sanskrit and Tamil, right? Like, for example, Ida, like we have Ida, Pingala, Sushumna, like they're actually like, Ida is actually a Tamil word. It's not even a Sanskrit word, right? Ida is left, right? And it is there in Tamil and even Sumerian, like, like these languages have it. So a lot of our words in yoga and Vedanta have got origin in both Sanskrit and Tamil. And as long as we retain them, then it is good for us also and good for them also.
I think my question was a little bit different. I'll just rephrase it with an example from what we discussed. While explaining the Panchakoshas, when you were speaking about Pranamaya Kosha, you mentioned about its connection to this temperature and body temperature, other things that the digestive system and all these activities, right? So my question was, are you saying that Pranamaya Kosha or the work of the prana is simply this, that digestive system and other things is the very definition of Pranamaya Kosha, or is it merely a physical manifestation of Pranamaya Kosha, which is basically a subtle entity which cannot be seen by eyes or any other equipments? We cannot actually measure it. So, because these two positions though appear similar, they are two different positions. Because the first positions is wherein we are actually trying to map Indian categories to Western categories, and Western categories basically are materialistic; they are physical categories. So they think that this Pranamaya Kosha is simply just the digestive system, the air, the oxygen we breathe, they equate prana with oxygen in this mapping, which is not the Indian
Yeah,
position. But
see
if we
that,
do the reverse thing, we will mainly say that this oxygen is the physical manifestation of the subtle prana, which is subtle in nature. So, which is your position in this?
see, translating prana to oxygen is the mistake.
Yes.
Okay, because prana is not oxygen, right? If at all you want to map prana to something in the body, it is the ATP ADP system. So we have the adenosine triphosphate, adenosine diphosphate, the energy system.
But
So in
is
the
it
body,
also a one-on-one correspondence?
no,
It's not, right?
that is the closest you can get. Okay,
That's a
so
physical manifestation.
see, what you need to understand is there are multiple layers in both the systems. Okay, and as you rightly said, the Western system is a materialistic system. So you have matter, and from matter, energy and other things evolve, and things evolve, right? Like it's a very simple way of putting it, So you have a material body, and from material body, you have life, or even to go to the extent, you have physics. From physics, chemistry comes. From chemistry, biology comes. From biology, psychology comes. All right. That
So
is
even
how.
consciousness is a product of matter. That is what they say.
That is a Western concept, because like it's a materialistic paradigm, right? And we need to be aware of the paradigm. Okay. Now, but then even though it is materialistic paradigm, this concept of emergence is there, where we say what emerges is more than what constitutes, right? Like life is not just put together, organic compounds put together, and then from chemistry, biology comes, but then how it comes, there is always a mystery there. And similarly, from biology, psychology comes, but how exactly it comes, like there is a concept of emergence, right, where what comes out is more than what is put in. Okay, so this is the way the materialistic paradigm has been built up. Now, whether it answers all the questions, and then the proof of the pudding is in eating. Like if it answers all the questions, then well and good. It's basically, and whatever it's just a model, right? Whereas the Indian model is top down, right? We say from consciousness, the subtle elements come, and from the mind comes, from the mind the body comes, and that is from the body the world comes, right? So basically, we go top down, right? We say that consciousness manifests as the tanmatras, and from the tanmatras, the sattvic part manifests as the mind, right? And then the tamasic part manifests as the Panchakosha. We have this, like the Panchikarana and all that, right? So we have our own system of how the subtlest, from the subtlest, the gross comes, right? Akashat, Vayu, Vayor, Agni, Agni, Rapa. Like we have the gradation, right? The top down one. So we approach always from the top down. We say, okay, prana is there, and prana manifests as something, right? Whereas from the Western paradigm, it will be okay, like the blood flows, and the blood has got these reactions happening, and that manifests as energy. So I wouldn't bother too much about getting these two fight with each other, two paradigms, right? As long as we recognize that there are two paradigms, and whether this is the right paradigm or that is the right paradigm, that is something which cannot be proved or disproved, right? That's an atindriya vishya, right? What is the fundamental substance in this world, right? Materialists will say matter, Buddhists will say mind, and the Advaita Vedantists will say Ishvara, Advaita Vedantists will say Chaitanya. Now, what is right, what is wrong? Now, what we would say is, these are all models, and any model tries to depict the reality, but reality is what we see. Ultimately, like we use all these models to understand reality, and to come up with some working systems, right? So we need not reject one model fully, and we need not accept another model fully. For some purposes, one model might be useful. For another purposes, another model may be useful, right? Which is okay. And it is okay to have multiple models. And the reality is beyond all these models. That we should understand.
That's a very balanced view, Gokulmuthu. I have not received any questions since anyways we are out of time now. Viewers, if you have any questions, tomorrow also we'll be meeting at the same time. Tomorrow's towards the end, you can ask those questions, and Gokulmuthu will be highlighting more and elaborating more on the concepts that he dealt to today. Thank you again, Gokulmuthu, for making time for this session. It was a wonderful session. I'm sure the viewers who watched the session live and who will be watching the recording afterwards, they all will be deeply benefited, greatly benefited from it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
With this, we come to the conclusion of today's session. Tomorrow also at 11 a.m. we'll meet again. If you have not registered yet, please do register for the Zoom session and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Shri Guru Bhyo Namah.